If you're a guy that's not throwing braid to a leader on your spinning reel, you're not going to want to miss this video, because what I'm going to do today is break down exactly why I do what I do, how it's going to save you a ton of money and help you catch more fish in 2024. So stick around, let me change your mind. So before braid came out, guys were throwing fluorocarbon and monofilament to fill up their entire spools on their spinning reel, and they had to deal with things like line twist, they have to deal with things like stretch. And the reason why that stretch was so important for so long was because the quality of rods was a lot less good, for lack of a better term, than it is now. Now we have the technology where we can make more and more flexible rods, and you see that over and over again. It used to be guys throwing broomstick spinning rods, and so they needed the stretch of the line to really make up for the lack of flexibility in that rod. So when they set the hook, they had to have some give, and the only way to do that was in the line. Well, now with the better rods that we have, the more high quality rods that we come out with every single year, you can get away with adding braid to a fluorocarbon leader. And what this is going to do is this is going to save you a ton of money, because if you think about it, you go through a lot of fluorocarbon on a reel, you go through a 200-yard spool of fluorocarbon just filling up your reel. Now if you buy a spool of fluorocarbon and braid, all you have to do is fill that braid up, and that braid will last you a couple years. You know, especially if you're not a turn wrangler like myself, where you only go out on the weekends, that braid will last you 2 to 3 years potentially, depending on how you store it. And it's going to save you a lot of money in the long run, and it's also going to help you catch more fish for reasons I'm going to list right now. So the beauty of braid is that it has absolutely no stretch, which you might be asking why that's a good thing. The reason that's a good thing is because now when you set the hook, you have a direct connection to those fish. And so you can use the fluorocarbon to give you a little bit of stretch, but the flexibility in your rod is going to be taking up most of that. And so where this is beneficial is it gives you better hook sets. You actually get a better hook set on those fish without any stretch in your line, and then you can let the drag do more of the work instead of relying on that line to stretch, which is why a lot of fish jump off. If you've ever noticed when you're hooking fish, if you're losing them at the first jump, it's because you're not getting a good enough hook set into those fish. That should never happen, and that will happen a lot less with braid, because what often happens is when somebody makes a cast and that fish eats it right when it hits the bottom, they set the hook right away, and that stretch in that fluorocarbon or monofilament, whatever you're throwing, along with the flexibility of that rod, barely puts that hook into the fish's mouth. And a lot of times they clamp down so hard that it really doesn't. And so that's what happens. They come up, open their mouth, lure goes flying, we get pissed, right? We're instantly throwing, going, ah, man, I thought I had a great hook set on those fish. You did, but because of all the stretch and flexibility there, you didn't get any penetration. And so that's where the braid comes in handy. When you make that hook set now, you don't have the stretch in that line, and you're gonna get a better connection to those fish, and you're gonna be able to fight those fish a lot better. Another thing that braid is really good for is actually cutting through vegetation and having a lot more durability when you're fishing around cover. And so if you're a guy that's fishing around trees, if you're fishing around grass, if you're fishing around docks, now that braid will actually save your butt in the long run, because it's not going to be like your fluorocarbon nicking something and instantly breaking. You have all of these strands that are woven together that are actually going to be a lot more durable while you're fishing, and it's actually going to give you time to manangle your way around through there. It'll cut through the grass, so you don't have to worry about your fluorocarbon wrapping around the grass, because if you've thrown fluorocarbon in grass, you know that line just wraps right around it, and then you're kind of screwed, right? Those fish weasel their way in, and you end up trying to pull on them, and they end up popping off almost every single time. Versus the braid, with the different strands that are in here, acts like a saw and actually cuts through that grass, so you can keep a direct line to those fish for the entirety of the fight. And it actually is super, super cool depending on what braid you use. I like Cortland Master Braid because it's a little bit more serrated and actually cuts through things a lot better, and it's a little bit more abrasion resistant. I think it's a 6 carrier line, 6 or an 8 carrier braided line. Once you get into 10, it's that super, super smooth braid, which is all well and good, but I just like my braid to have a little bit of abrasion resistance and a little bit more cutting power when I'm fishing around cover. One key thing when you're spooling up your reel with fluorocarbon is that you either want to put some type of cheap mono backing on there, because when you're tying your spool on here, what'll happen is if you put just straight braid and tie a knot, it doesn't cinch down tight and it'll just spin on your spool. And so you can either use cheap monofilament to put as backing on here, so you don't even have to use an entire spool of braid when you're filling up your reel. Or you can put a piece of electrical tape on your braid or around your braid when you make your first wrap on your spool. That'll actually help hold it on, and it'll actually cinch into the electrical tape, so that way when you're pulling your drag, your spool's not just spinning freely. Because if you've had that happen, that's why. If you've ever noticed when you spool just straight braid on your entire reel, it might not do it at first, but eventually it'll just start slipping. And so what you'll need to do is take the line all the way off, either add a little piece of monofilament or just put a piece of tape around there, and that will save you for the entire time. The other beautiful part about having a fluorocarbon leader attached to braid is it's interchangeable. And so what you can do is, instead of having to get into a situation where you want to go to 8 instead of 6, or 10 instead of 6, or 10 to 6, you can just change out a 20-foot section or a 15-foot section, or if you're fishing around a lot of heavy cover, you can even have a super short section on here. It gives you a lot more options as far as how you want to proceed with the line that you have on there, and it gives you the ease and accessibility to change it, which is something that you don't have with an entire spool of fluorocarbon. You end up having to have a bunch of different spinning reels, one with 10, one with 8, one with 6, and then you have to play with it. Versus if I just have braid to a leader, I can cut the leader off, tie a new leader on. Quick like that. I can always make sure that it's perfectly, you know, a good line on there. And then I can change the length of my leader. If you're fishing super clear water, you can fish really, really long leaders, versus if you're fishing dirty water or you're fishing around cover, you can make that leader 4 feet, 3 feet, 2 feet even if you wanted to. And so it gives you a whole lot more options, which is something that as an angler I absolutely love to have, because it makes me more efficient on the water, and it's going to save you money in the terms of line that you have to spool on there. You're no longer going to have to spool on entire spools of fluorocarbon. You put that braid on once a year, once every 2 years, and you're good to go. It's also cool because if you put high vis braid on here, you can see it really, really easy. And so if you're a guy that's getting up there in age, I'm 27 and I can already start to see, you know, a little bit of a difference in my vision. So if you're up there in 40, 50, 60, 70, that high vis braid will allow you to see if a fish has grabbed that and is pulling with that, or see where your line is hooking to. I recently had a video go viral on Instagram where I dove under a dock to get a fish that I had skipped a wacky rig up under a dock, and the fish went through the entire dock. A lot of you guys have probably seen it. And so I stripped down to my underwear and swam under this dock to go get that fish. But the way I was able to know where it was is because I had high vis braid and I could follow my line, because I had to go into the dock, under one pole, under another side, and under another side, and finally swim out. And then that fish got caught in the grass, and so I was able to reel it tight and that line cut through that grass, because it was like a 5.5 pound largemouth, which was super, super awesome. So if you haven't seen that video, check it out. It's on my Instagram at Jonathan Dietz Fishing. But it's just all these benefits to braid these days is just, it's honestly a no-brainer in my mind, because of the accessibility of it, the ease to change the line, and just how much money you're going to save on it. So there's really no reason in my mind why I wouldn't go to straight braid to a leader instead of all fluorocarbon. But, you know, that's just my opinion on it, and hopefully I help change your mind a little bit, and hopefully it helps you guys catch more fish that are out there on the water. But if you want to know a little bit more about what rods you should be throwing, I have a video linked up here where I break down all the baits that go well with a medium heavy spinning rod. So if you're a guy that just has spinning rods and wants to know a little bit more about what baits go really, really well with that, be sure to check that video out. But thank you guys so much for watching. God bless, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.